Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and today we're going to be doing something a bit different. We're going to be talking about the different ways Runeterra can, improve the game. And I just want to start off by saying this is not a criticism video of Legends of Runeterra by any means. I think Runeterra is by far the best card game or digital card game that exists, and I think it's not close, and I think the benefits of Runeterra are way better than every other card game, and that's why I play it exclusively, because that is what I believe. But of course there is room for some improvements, and so that's what we'll be talking about today, right? Where should Runeterra go? And I put up a poll a couple days ago about this, and so thank you for everyone who took part and voted in the poll. And we can get up the results of said poll. Here we are. So this is it. This is where I've decided to call it. Is where so we had more different game modes, different release balance schedule, more customization, more in-game tournaments, and obviously other. For the comments below, and we'll get into some of the comments in a bit. So let's just quickly go through each of these. What the results of the poll said to me. I expected more different game modes to be at the top. I think that's what I would have voted for. But then the others, I was kind of like, well, it really could go any other way, and I'm not sure which way it will go. But I was surprised that different release balance schedule was pretty close with the different game modes. It was pretty close between the two, so that I found very interesting. And then the others at 14-15%, and then other, as I say, we'll get into the comments below. But what should we take away from this? Well, I think, as I say, expected was the different game modes, but the different release balance schedule is interesting. More customization, I think they've talked about that will be coming in the future, and we can expect that. And they're gonna have like the champion progression thing, with cosmetics for each champion, changing as you level them up essentially, which should be pretty exciting. So that one I think we can probably say will be taken care of. And the more in-game tournaments, competitive gameplay, I think. They've got the seasonal tournament, of course, and I think what will probably happen is they'll focus on getting that to a level that they think is good enough, and tweaking it and finding adjustments to it to make it, to get to a place where they want it to be, and then they might move on to looking at creating other kind of in-game tournaments, or finding other ways. And of course there are external tournaments as well. So I think that, again, for now, I think, they're probably looking at tweaking what they've already got and then looking at expanding that. And of course, other people creating external tournaments as well is another way of doing it. So what I'm going to focus on today is actually these top two, the more in different game modes and the different release balance schedules, because I think they're both very interesting in, coming up with ideas for how it could change. And, potentially what's gone wrong with certain things, and why we might want to see more of these things. So that is what we are going to focus on today. So firstly, let's look at the different game modes we have in the game currently, right? Let's take a look at what we've got at the moment, and where things may have gone wrong or right. So obviously, first things first, the main game mode, I would say, of this game is versus player. Whether that be in ranked or normal, fairly standard stuff. I'm sure most card games that exist have this. Certainly the ones that I've played, have this kind of format. And the same for versus AI. Generally speaking, games do have an AI component to them where you can just play them and, have a non-sort of competitive factor to them. Very standard stuff, so I'm not really going to say great or not great. Pretty standard stuff. I mean, you could talk about maybe the ranked ladder and how that works. Personally, I'm not a great fan of ranked ladders as a whole. I think they promote kind of boring, repetitive games. But, some people love the grind and love the competitive element of a ranked ladder, so I suppose let them have their fun. I'm not going to go into that today, but let's say that this is a net neutral, right? The expected. Then we, of course, have the expeditions, the draft version. I was in the middle of a trial, I think. So, obviously, the draft. And what do I think about expeditions? I think most people would say that expeditions are probably not up to the standard of other card games. I came from Magic Arena, and draft was a really big thing in Magic Arena, and those of you who've played it will know what I'm talking about, because that was a key way of collecting cards, was going into limited format in Magic, and you essentially you pick the cards and you got those cards, right? Runeterra, of course, is built differently. It's much more free-to-play friendly, where you can easily collect the whole set without having to spend any money. So for that reason, there isn't this incentive to play draft that there is in other card games, perhaps. This actually, for those of you who are newer to the game, you might not know this, but actually, expeditions used to be like Magic Arena, where a draft was your key way of getting a champion. Back in the day, your weekly vault didn't contain either a champion card or a champion wild card. Instead, you got your champion wild card or your champion card from the expedition. And even if you got 0 wins, you still got the champion, I think. And at that point, it was you just got the champion. And it was a random champion. It wasn't one that you picked or whatever. It was just a random champion card. And that is how you got your, one champion a week, instead of it being the weekly vault. And so you were incentivized to play expeditions every week, essentially. And, if you got good at them, then you'd obviously get more wins and get more rewards. They changed that. And when they changed that, I think expedition kind of fell off a cliff a bit for most people. I know there is a smaller community who really enjoys playing expeditions. And I think when you play an expedition, they're actually quite fun. I don't think there's anything wrong with the game mode. I think what's wrong is there isn't an incentive to play expeditions. And speaking personally, I actually think the older system was better. I think the idea of having this extra game mode that, you would play to go and try and get a champion, it is a better system. I kind of disagree with the fact that they changed that. I understand that they want people to be free, and for people who don't enjoy expeditions, they don't want to feel like they have to play expeditions. But at the same time, I think most people nowadays probably don't play expeditions, and I'm sure there's probably some people who maybe have never even played expeditions who actually would really enjoy it, because it is actually quite a fun way of playing the game. Particularly for newer players, it's a great way to, play with different cards that you don't own. And so I think they could go back to what they used to do. I think not everyone would be on board with that idea. But to me, it's not the worst idea, right? Like, if you up the percentage chance of getting a champion in certain capsules or whatever, and then give those capsules for having a large weekly vault, I think I don't see why not, right? Let's say if you get your weekly vault past 13 up to 14, you unlock this special capsule that gives you a 50-50 chance of getting a champion in it, right? That way you don't have to play expeditions, but your chances are 50-50, right? Something like that, I think, would be a good way of sort of giving a balance to both. And I kind of miss expeditions, I think. People aren't that interested in expeditions. So, as a content creator, am I a content creator? Can I really say that yet? I somewhat avoid them because people aren't that interested in them. But I think if you, incentivize people to play expeditions, I don't actually have a problem with the mode itself. Moving on to what else we've got. We've got challenges. Now, I don't think I've ever clicked on this. You can see that I haven't done these ones. I think I've done some of them further down. I think that the first battle, you have to do this at the tutorial, right? But you can see I haven't done these ones. Now, this to me is really interesting. And this kind of links in, I think, to something that I think a new game mode that I would really be interested in, and that's puzzles, right? These are kind of puzzles in a way that, you play against the AI and you have certain cards, and I think it rewards you for playing them in a certain order or doing things the right way. But they're very simple, right? Just to teach people the game. For me personally, I would love to see a puzzle mode, right? I think that would be a lot of fun. I think that that would be one of the top priorities for a new game mode I would make. I think like chess puzzles, for those of you who don't know, are pretty fun, to me at least. And I think like Runeterra type puzzles, there's a lot of moving parts in Runeterra. There's the attack token as well. There's the initiative system, right? So I envisage the puzzles being like, you know, you can see your opponent's hand. You obviously can see your hand. And so you can make informed plays, but, you know, you have to figure out what the right order is and stuff like that. And to me, if they could make like, you know, there's a 5 puzzle a week, or 5 puzzles every 2 weeks, let's say, right? Every time they do a new patch. 5 puzzles every 2 weeks, and if you solve them for the first time or whatever, then, you know, you get some reward, right? If you solve each of the 5 and they go up in difficulty each time, you know, if you do it first time, you don't make a single mistake, then you get a certain reward, right? If you make one mistake, you get that, and, you know, it goes down and down. That would be really interesting. I would do it every single 2 weeks. Without fail, I would definitely do it, and it would be really interesting, right? And it would make a fun video as well of seeing, you know, how good can you get at these puzzles. So that's one game mode that I kind of thought about, and challenges here. I bring this up because, of course, challenges. This is kind of where it would seemingly fit in. It's kind of weird that they have this that I doubt anyone ever really clicks on, but it's there, and it kind of seems like, you know, they've kind of just left it there just in case, like, because this could disappear, right? You could do the tutorial or whatever, you know, and maybe it would offer you the options to do this, and this could disappear. For all intents and purposes, this could just disappear and you don't have to see it at all, right? But it's there. And I wonder if they've kept it there because they have this idea in mind for, you know, a sort of puzzle challenge, and I think that that would be an ideal game mode to add. Moving on, we have the Gauntlet. Now, Gauntlet is another one that I really want to talk about here, because Gauntlet is, you know, standard Gauntlet, pick and ban. You also have the singleton Gauntlets as well, right? And so, what do I think about Gauntlets? Well, Gauntlets are, of course, a way of getting Prime Glories and potentially getting into the seasonal tournament, and that's fine. And I don't have a problem with the 7 wins, 2 losses. That seems pretty fair. To me, though, what I really miss, the main thing I miss from Magic Arena is constructed event. Constructed event. Now, constructed event, for those of you who don't know, maybe didn't play Magic, is essentially you pay like a small amount. I guess the equivalent would be gems. It was gold in Arena. You pay a small amount of gold, which is, you know, the currency that you just collect from playing anyway. And then you enter, and if you get to 4 wins, I think you get 3 losses, is it? If you get to 4 wins, then you make your money back and you get a couple of cards. And, you know, if you get more than 4 wins, it goes up to 7. Then obviously you get better cards and more gold, right? And I loved it. And I really, really, really loved it. I loved Constructed Event, because Constructed Event did something that you can't guarantee with Ranked Ladder Queue or Normal Queue. It was best of 1 as well. You could play a best of 3, I think, but you played a best of 1, and you entered with your deck. But what it meant was people were much more willing to play decks that are decent, but not like top tier. They wanted to try out a deck that, you know, they thought they could win enough with, but wasn't like, you know, a tier 1 deck, because you just play that in Ranked Ladder. And so it allowed you to experiment and see all these different decks, but still, you know that you're playing against someone most likely who, you know, has all the cards, or, you know, is of a similar skill level to you. And that's really important, because, of course, with normal queue, you can come up against anyone. You could come up against a complete beginner. You could come up against, you know, a ranked master, right? And that's scary. Whereas if you play rank queue, you get to a certain point and it starts getting, you know, actually competitive. And, you know, speaking from experience, I have sort of a ranked ladder queue anxiety. I don't really enjoy laddering up. I never have. And what a standard event, what a Gauntlet could give you, if a Gauntlet looked like that, was a chance to play freely. And that is another thing that I would love for them to add into the game, because the Gauntlet as it is right now is a lot of, it's almost too competitive, I would say. You know, the idea of a ban, this kind of tournament format where you pick 3 decks and ban one, seems very, Like, it's very competitive focused. No one's going in there, really. No one's going into a gauntlet with 3 decks that are kind of, meme decks, right? Everyone's going in with probably 2 top tier decks and maybe 1 like frisky pick. It's too competitive, and it, at this point it's like, yeah, that's fine, but it's essentially just ranked ladder with extra steps. Essentially, it's just competitive ranked ladder is the way I see it personally. And so I'd love to see a gauntlet, a sort of separate gauntlet mode that you can still have this competitive one, which is fine, but then also have sort of a more relaxed one, something that isn't as crucial to you. Yeah, I think that would be a really fun mode. And as I say, have a small entry fee of gems, 300 gems, right? 300 gems to enter. If you win 4 games, you get those 300 gems back and, an epic capsule or whatever. If you win 7 games, you get, 1,000 gems and you get, your epic, 2 epic capsules, right? Something like that, right? Just a simple reward structure of there you go. Go into it if you want, risk a small amount of gems. No big deal. Gems you'll get pretty easily, so it's no big deal. And I would love that. I would absolutely love that. But unfortunately, it's not there. Then we have a tournament, which obviously is not really part of this because it's the seasonal tournament. And then we have labs. Now, labs I would say is one of the more successful things that they've done. This kind of weird, wacky, different things. Some labs are more successful than others. United Front, I think, is quite an interesting one, and especially if they changed it from Noxus, it would be super interesting. And Welcome to the Jungle, I think, another good one, right? I think this was another pretty successful one. Welcome to the Jungle. It really did change the game. So Labs, I would say, is probably the most successful normal game mode that they could have. I've already mentioned a couple others for people that I would like to see as well, in the puzzles and a sort of single gauntlet, more relaxed gauntlet. But then we're also going to dive into some people's comments and look at some of their ideas and maybe what else could be going on in this game. So the first comment I want to discuss was one by Daniel McKenzie. Thank you, Daniel, if you're watching, and that is a Pauper game mode. Pauper, for those of you who don't know, again, is a Magic thing where essentially you aren't allowed. I think Pauper is where you aren't allowed to play the rares and mythic rares, and I think there's another one where you can't play uncommons as well. I might be slightly off on that. It's something like that. And what that does, of course, is essentially in Magic it says, most of the good cards that you're playing with, you can't play with. Make a deck of worse cards, right? Of less played cards. Here's what I think about that idea. It's of course not a bad idea. It would be an interesting game mode and would give you, different ways of playing. However, I don't think they would ever bring something like that in. Simply because this game is built around champions. I think they've made that, they've said that. I'm pretty sure that, they want this game to be built around champions. And so, getting a format without champions, I think, would probably not work. However, I do think there's something else that Magic did, which was, what was it called? Something like Standard Shake-Up? It was something like that, where they had a sort of event where you played in games, and top cards from the meta were banned. You couldn't use a list of, let's say, 5 to 10 cards, right? So all the top cards that you see in the meta regularly, they're gone. That is something that I think you could see in this game. For instance, you take Lee Sin with Zoe, and you get rid of Sparklefly, you get rid of Eye of the Dragon, right? All of a sudden that deck doesn't quite work if you can't use those cards. And so, people probably wouldn't bring that deck. Or they would have to bring a more experimental version of it, right? And this is the kind of thing that I think you definitely could see where, you take all the best decks, you take, say, the top 10 decks in the game, you pick a couple cards from each of those decks, you say, non-champion cards, I would think, you take those cards, you say, you can't use these cards, find something else to play with, and all of a sudden you end up with this event where people are probably playing very different decks, very interesting decks. And it's an easy way to sort of, again, a dream for me where, I don't have to play against Zoe Lee Sin or against Plaza decks all day, right? You can just play against whatever, right? You can just play against, oh, look, here's Timo, right? Here's Heimerdinger, here's Darius, right? Like a bunch of things that you haven't seen in a while. There might still be decent decks, and it might also help people discover, wait, this is actually really good. This deck is actually really, really good. Why was no one playing this, right? So it could shake up the meta even after the fact that it existed, and I think that is something that I personally, again, would love to see, and I think it would be a very, very fun and good idea. Another idea Another idea coming from you lovely people was that of Kremschnitt. Another idea from you lovely people was that from Kremschnitt. I have to be very careful how I pronounce that name. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. You can tell me down below if I got that wrong. I'm not going to say it again in case I get it wrong. But their idea was to have essentially, the community comes up with some balance changes for certain cards. Riot will post a list of, we want your ideas for, these cards. Give us ideas for these cards and we'll incorporate them into this mode. They take suggestions, they potentially pick out what changes they think they like the best. And, all of a sudden this card does X in this game mode, right? And so they have this list of cards, they get changed for this game mode, you play them within this game mode, and then it's essentially an easy way for sort of the community to help with the balance of the game and, come up with different ideas and essentially help balance the game and come up with cool, unique ideas. Now, what do I think about this game mode? I can definitely see some merit to it, and I think if they were, if they took a list of those cards and, could select the ones that they thought, were meaningful. Because, of course, people tend to be pretty bad at balancing cards. And, sometimes I guess this mode would, sometimes would have just creations of cards that were completely busted or completely terrible. And so it might not always work out. In some weeks it might just be a complete non-factor, and other weeks it might be really fun, right? So there's a bit of give and take there. I think the problem with this is wondering how people send in the requests. Do they tweet it at Riot? Like, do they tweet a text version? Does Riot create like a card edit, like an easy card editor function? That seems pretty difficult. So I'm not sure on the specifics, but let's just go with the idea. I think maybe a problem with this format would be that, essentially you could probably play, 3 to 4 games with a certain card and be like, yeah, this is a really good idea, or yeah, this is a bad idea. Unless you had a very long list, right? If you had a long list of cards that you potentially wanted to change and you could just, see and change, then I think then that would be okay. Of course, Riot does pay people to balance the game, so I'm not sure how they would feel about it personally. I think it's an interesting idea. I'm not sure they'd do it because they probably, as I mentioned, it would probably be difficult to sort of get through the community responses, and get through sort of the horde of trolls and who do you listen to and who do you not listen to, right? And so I'm not sure that they would go with it, but it's definitely a fun idea for sure. So now let's dive into the card release schedule, and I've got it up essentially this picture here on Runeterra ccg.com, and this is of course the release schedule that we are in now, right? August we get a new region, October, December we get new cards, February new region. This has actually been pushed back to March now, so I think it's March. What is it? March, May, June still. And then potentially August, they might go back to it. We'll see, or maybe later in August. I don't know. That's the schedule we're on right now. And of course, Runeterra has tried something that is completely different to other card games. Right? They wanted to go with the system of updating the game more regularly. but with less, less big patches. You can see every so often you do get a big patch every 6 months, but then in between are dispersed little patches, right? And other games treat this, differently how they release cards. Some do it. I mean, most games, release new cards probably somewhere between 3 to 6 months, right? That's where I think most card games would probably fall. And, most card games just say every, 3 to 6 months, here's a big wad of cards. Now silence from us. In 3 to 6 months, come back and we'll have another big wad of cards for you. Runeterra obviously is doing this a bit differently, and I found it very interesting that people seemingly don't love this, and I completely understand why. Because if we go back to what happened in October when we got Tahm Kench, Soraka, and Shyvana, what happened? Well, we got one new deck from it. There was the Tahm Kench Soraka deck, and that was it. There wasn't really a deck for Shyvana. Some of the dragons were quite cool, but, essentially that 2-month period that we waited, we got one new deck from. Not great. Now let's fast forward to December, and again we got some nice cards, some cards that have really shaken up the meta, Ballistic Bot, Grand Plaza, stuff like that. And we got Zoe, who of course is in a lot of different decks, and then we got Victor and Riven, who haven't really seen any play. That's a problem, and I think that is where the core of the problem is. What they need to do with these champions that are coming out in these smaller patches, they have to be better than they are. They have to be on a very, very playable level. And I think what's probably happened is they've tried to make these champions, as fair as they can be and put them in a spot that they think is okay. But in reality, these champions are below par, and, it doesn't take long for people to figure out that they are below par. And when it comes to these new champions, I think that they need to have, an emergency release button 2 weeks after, straight away. What do I mean by that? I think that they should release these champions in these small patches. They have 3 new champions. For each one, they should have this champion is too weak, do this, and this champion is too strong, do this, for 2 weeks, right? They should think about that and think, okay, if this turns out to be too good or whatever, we can just do this to it. And if it turns out to be too bad or whatever, we can just do this straight away. Because then at least you have a way of trying to make things interesting still and keep the vibe around, in those first 2 weeks that, everyone's still excited, trying out new stuff. So if after 2 weeks, it was like, Riven's not very good, guys. Okay, right, here's what we do to change Riven. Bang, new Riven, still interesting. We tried to figure it out, whatever, right? They might not want to do that because it kind of maybe makes them look a bit bad that they didn't figure out that the first time. But when you only have 3 new champions coming into the game, they all have to be like Zoe. They all have to be really flexible, and they all have to be strong enough to see consistent play. They have to be an above average champion, I would say, to actually make things interesting. If we got 3 different Zoes in one of these expansions, I don't think anyone would complain about this system. But the problem is, if you get one Zoe, and then, Tahm Kench and Soraka are fine, but they're not flexible enough to fit in multiple decks, you end up with kind of this system where you're left there with well, wow, we got one new champion, a couple cool cards that, are making an impact on the meta, and then a bunch of cards that aren't doing anything. And I think that leaves people a bit frustrated, and people feel a bit lost with what they're doing. So the thing is, they have to make sure that the champions that are coming out in these smaller patches are, worth playing. And if they, don't, then potentially we could look at new systems. Now, I will say that one thing that I think people might forget is that with each new region comes a new champion each time. Obviously, they want the amount of champions in the game to be the same. At a certain point, they want them to be around the same. And I know some people have pointed out that, Ionia has 1 million champions, Targon has 10 or less than 10. How are they going to, figure that out? But we've seen, I know that Teemo isn't actually from PNZ or whatever, and they've, going to rearrange certain things and whatever. So let's just assume that they figure it out. They figure out a way to make enough champions, to at least get to let's say let's say each region gets to at least 10 champions, right? Yeah, we're pretty sure that 10 regions are going to come out. So let's say that each region can get to a solid 10 champions, which I think that they could manage pretty easily. But of course, with each region, as I mentioned, a new champion each time comes out because each region has to get one each time. So we can probably expect more cards, each new region gets added, more cards will come out each time. So therefore, it might be more exciting later on, and we might get down to the end of the system when the 10th region is coming out, and we might be like, oh yeah, this is fine because there's plenty of cards. Each time we're getting 4 new champions rather than the 3 in the first one, and we're getting 10 new champions in the new region, and all this, right? Like it might be become more and more exciting as the game expands, and it might become absolutely fine as we get more and more new cards. But I think for now, what people have kind of sort of gone into is a bit like, well, the new region comes out, it's really exciting, and then it's like, meh, it kind of tails off a bit because there isn't as much. And as someone who played when Bilgewater came out, I would say that was the peak of the game for me so far, was when Bilgewater came out. It was so exciting. I was so pumped when Bilgewater came out, and it lasted for a long, long time. Because then I remember, because you had a month, because they didn't do this system with Bilgewater, by the way. They had a month, but that month was like enough time to just explore everything. And then a big balance patch came, and they changed quite a few things then as well. And it was like, whoa, everything's changing again. Oh my god! Like, was that the one where they buffed Anivia and Braum? And it was like, oh my god, these champions are back! And they changed a bunch of cards, right? And that's kind of what I'm hoping they do in a couple of days' time. Please. But that was really exciting. And then they announced that they're going to go for this different shift, and I don't mind it, but I don't think it has been that successful, because then when Targon came out, maybe it was the Targon Champions, maybe it was that I wasn't that excited about what Targon did. The reveal season was really cool, but then when the cards actually came out, I found, within 2 weeks, it's kind of like you've kind of explored Targon, like, Targon's kind of done, and then it was like, oh, well, wait another 2 weeks for a big balance match, and then oh, well, wait a bit more. And I think that's where we can come back to another thing is, generally with balance patches, they tend not to do big balance patches when cards are coming out. And it makes sense, right? You don't want to disrupt the meta when you don't know what the meta will be after these new cards come out. However, I think you could argue that there is a mistake in that philosophy, because Go Hard, I mean, as the most recent example, they could have easily nerfed Go Hard when, the last set of champions came out. I could have told you that Go Hard was too good. We were at that stage where people had kind of figured out Go Hard's too good, they should probably change it. But they didn't. And then they waited another month, and so we all had to suffer like another month of Go Hard before they changed it. And then that wasn't even a change that they wanted to do then. So in their ideal, they wanted to change Go Hard in February. When really I could have told them back in December that it needed changing. And I think that that's maybe another thing that they could look at where, don't be afraid. Balance the cards. And if you find out, oh, maybe we should bring it back, then just change it back. They've done it with other cards. I don't see why they go, well, this card has been oppressive for a while, let's not change it. But no, change it. Just because new cards are coming out, if a card is really, really good, it'll still be really, really good even when new cards come out. If not even better if something helps it along as well. So I think I'd take a look at that and potentially adding in extra balance patches as well, because when new cards come out, maybe not the new regions, I can understand them not wanting to balance the game when a whole new region and a ton of cards come out, but maybe in these smaller patches, right, when three champions are coming out and their associated cards, don't be afraid to just add a balance patch into the game as well. Because I think it would be pretty helpful for the game to, again, just stay fresh. You have the new cards that are staying fresh, and you've got these change cards staying fresh, so the meta is kind of completely unknown. Because there was nothing more annoying to me than playing on Ranked Ladder on the first day when those new cards come out, and there's me with Zoe Victor, trying something cool, and all I'm seeing is Twisted Fate Go Hard. And that was my experience on the first day for a large portion of it. Was just, I want to be the first to Masters. I'm just going to play Twisted Fate Go Hard because I know it's a really good deck and nothing really has affected it. And that was really annoying to me. And that, again, is another way of, let's stop those people from doing that. Have fun with the game. God damn you, have fun. Anyway, just some suggestions there that they could add balance patches. I think there is potential with this system. I know people might be a bit frustrated with it, but as I say, as it expands, I think we'll get more new cards each time as more regions come into the game. And so I think by the end of it, it will be okay. How they do a reset, because they're probably going to have to reset it at some point, and sort of flush out the old champions in with either new versions of new cards. I'm not sure they've even worked this out yet, but when that comes and when that's announced, I'll talk about that. That's probably a couple of years away at this point. But yeah, they're going to have to figure something out, and I'm kind of interested to see how they do that. Because then, like, if they get rid of all the Foundations cards, of course, because Foundations is such a big set, then will they have to replace it with an equally big, massive set? Where like 6 regions get 4 champions? If so, the spoiler season is going to be wild. So we'll see how that goes. I think I've rambled on for way too long, so let's call it here. Really interested in what you guys think. What game modes do you think should be added to the game? Of course, 2v2, I forgot to mention 2v2 is obviously one that they're probably ramping up for, and I'm pretty excited for as well. And how would you change the balance patch schedule if, and card new release schedule if you were going to? I think personally I'd probably wait a bit, but as I say, ensure that those champions that come out in those smaller patches are good. Push them a bit too far and bring them back, a month later. Because the thing is, when a card is new, even if it's really good, it takes about a month, I would say, for people to get sick of it. I'd say it probably took a month for people to get sick of Plaza. Of course, it being a really, really good card. So you can use that month grace period of having a champion that's really good as, everyone just enjoying it at first. And then, you just bring it down a month later and then it's fine, right? That's probably what I'd be doing rather than making something just weak and not having any impact. So with that said, I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment letting me know, because that poll was really interesting for me, because I wasn't going to talk about this at all, because I didn't think anyone would care, and I thought people were probably mostly satisfied with it. But that's how you find these things out. So yeah, I might do a couple more polls about when I'm going to come up with these podcast videos. So thank you so much for watching. I've been Chris. Have a really nice day.